We'll just give everybody another minute to join. All right, I'll go ahead and get started. Thanks for joining. First few minutes, I just want to walk through a few of the basics. Some people who are joining probably don't use BoviSync much or don't know how to get different resources, so I want to cover that first, and then we'll get into some of the more advanced Repro type of reporting. So the very first thing, so if you're unfamiliar with BoviSync, there's a bunch of different ways that we can help you learn it. There's BoviSync Help Center. We got a bunch of knowledge base articles there, different community posts. We've got a whole library of different global reports, a report map. I'll introduce you guys to a couple of those things. And then just contacting support@bovisync.com. We do a really good job and really can spend some time trying to teach you guys how to do more reporting and how to get more insights out of all the data that's in BoviSync. A lot of the things that are in this seminar, you'll also be able to find in this knowledge base article. So within our knowledge base, you search for that reproduction, compliance monitoring, and improvement. You'll be able to find links to many of the different reports and some descriptions of some of what we're doing here. There's some additional things, but that article does cover quite a bit. So to get started, just trying to hit on some of the real basics of BoviSync. Just want to touch on first the global reports. So once you're logged into BoviSync, log into the farm, log into multiple farms, whatever it is that you're doing. In the menu, you can go to reports and go to that Bovi Insights reports, hit search. And then within there, there's a few hundred different reports that you can search. So some of the ones that we're showing today, you'll be able to find there. And this is just a video walkthrough of how to do it, just to make sure everybody's on the same page. Those first couple of check marks are some of the user reports or farm reports. You can narrow it down to being just some of the global reports if you want. So the other good place to go is this report map. And so this is, I don't know, 1,000 reports, something like that, organized in a mind map. And so within this mind map, you can start at the base piece, and then you have a bunch of different areas you can go into, genetics, milk quality, reproduction, health and disease, genetics, whatever it is. But to get there is go to reports, report map, and then you can click into the different sections. And then within those sections, it can further divide out farther. But it's a really convenient way to be able to see a whole lot of reports in different areas. And then this is just the video kind of walking through that report map. As we get past some of this basic stuff, if there's questions, there's a QA thing in here. Just ask any questions as we go. Here, some of those, like the Repro, you can go farther and then drill into some of these different ones. And one of the screenshots we'll see later is going into some of those reports. So to start off, just kind of a couple of really basic reports that I usually start with for a farm. One of them can be the preg rate report, and the other is just the percent pregnant and open at 150 and 300 days. That percent pregnant, there you can find that in the global search. open that up and then just try and look at, what percent of the cows are getting pregnant by 150 days within those different lactation groups. That's a really key KPI for most dairies. I think that's the easiest way to try and evaluate some of that repro overall. The preg rate can get influenced by a lot of different factors, the voluntary waiting period. But if you want to keep cows in a high fertility cycle, having a high percentage of cows that are pregnant by 150 days, I think is everybody's goal. And so that can be a really nice number that is standardized across everybody. Going farther, using BoviInsights to gain repro insight. A lot of what I'm going to try and show you is some of the process failures. In general, most of the repro, like we've gotten repro pretty well figured out. We understand a lot of different mechanics behind it, and we can choose to have higher or lower conception rate by choosing different ways that we're doing our repro with different shop protocols, different activity systems. We have a lot of control over those things. So one of the first places that can be helpful to look is just the conception rate by technician. This is a pretty basic report that most everybody has, and everybody has looked at for years. Here you can find this one from the search, and then the couple of things highlighted here is this quick filter. So within here, when I open it up, it's for all lactation groups. But if I just want to separate this out, depending upon how I have different technicians, maybe they breed equal amounts across all the different lactation groups, maybe they don't. But here I can use these quick filters to put in a 1 or greater than 1, greater than 2, whatever it is that you want, to be able to instantly drill down into that and be able to see what the differences are between the different technicians split up into those different lactation groups. Another common question can be, what's the impact of transition disease on conception rates? And here I can, this report you can find with that global search, and I can open up animals that either came through transition period healthy or ones that had transition issues. And by using some of these different quick filters, I'll start this over again, it goes pretty quick. Here I can look at just the first service and what's the difference. And so here I can see there's about a 16-point difference on first service. And for lactation greater than 1, there I can see so here first service is 11%. Yeah, I'm going through this video a little too quick. Anyway, you can get the idea here. I can drill into the different lactation groups and take off that quick filter and be able to see all the different groups within healthy or transition. In this report, there's a whole lot of stuff going on. So this repro treatment by name. So in the middle here, you see a whole lot of different codes and numbers. So what this report is the conception rate by compliance. And so one of the things that a lot of times we'll hear is, well, maybe it's shot compliance. Maybe shot compliance is the reason that we're having repro problems. Well, here we can go in and we can look at it, because every shot's going to have some record of, every gene or H, every PGF that's given. We can go back and we can look at all of the different shots that have been given leading up to that timed AI, and then determine what that shot compliance is. So on this one here, what this means is before that timed AI, there's a gene or H given 27 days before, a PGF 20 days before, a gene or H 17 days before, another gene or H 10 days before, a PGF 3 days before, and a PGF 2 days before, and then there was no gene or H given immediately before that timed AI. Whereas the double OVSync with 2 PGF, this one has the complete shot sequence. Here, this one that's double OVSync without the 2 PGF, what's missing is that PGF2. But one of the big things I'll call your attention to here is this highlighted. So In this report, we're looking at 3,100 breedings for double BoviSync, and 2,900 have the full sequence. And so here, I mean, you're looking at 200 that weren't done. And so this is like, better than 95% shot compliance for seeing every single shot all the way through. So here you can see it and say, yeah, that probably is not a problem. That's not what's causing it. And I think it can be really helpful to be able to rule it out, or a place to be able to look into it further. Because as I was saying before, in general, most of the repro problems that we run into, it's process problems. There's some breakdown in the process somewhere along the line. Another place that we can look at breakdowns into process is looking at who's giving the shots. The PGF3 does have a really significant impact on conception rates. I don't know if I can find an example here. None that show up here. When that PGF3 is missed, you'll see a pretty big difference in conception rates. And so by looking at who is that's putting their name to doing that PGF3, maybe they're giving that shot, maybe that they aren't, but if they're giving it, maybe they have problems with, site or the administration or the dosage that they're giving. There could be a variety of different things that they're doing wrong, even if they're the ones doing that shot. And so this conception rate by PGF3 technician, it's the same conception rate report as some of these other ones. So the same, think of it as being the same as this conception rate by technician. But instead of grouping it by technician, for the breeding technician, we're going to group it by the technician of that third PGF. And so now we can see by different technicians, are there differences? And really, I'm going to look at the people that are giving quite a few shots. And so here we're looking at people that are giving 200 or more shots. And here we can see that there's a 15-point difference between these two people and then these two. So that's a good place to be able to find that here's a place where we need to do some review on shot compliance. And you can probably pretty safely assume that it's not just this PGF3 that they're having problems with. I think in general, you can make some assumptions that they're probably also having similar problems with vaccines and some of the other repro shots that they're doing. Another place that's interesting to look at is on the palpator. So everybody's been looking at the conception rate by breeding technician for a long time. But here, when we're able to look at what is it by the palpator, that palpator has a really big impact on the conception rate. If they're not doing a good job palpating cows and determining pregnant and open correctly, that'll have a significant impact on your conception rate. And so this is a report you can find in the global reports by searching for it. And so here what this is the technician of that first breeding or first preg check. And so after that first preg check, this technician here, this person here had 610 first preg checks. And I put in a quick filter for greater than 1. So this is all the adult cows that we're looking at. Of those, 51% are pregnant and at a 9% loss rate and 46% for pregnancy kept. Looking at all of these other people, and this person doing the most of them, most of these other people that are doing significant amounts are a lot closer. They're at 60% that they're finding pregnant, and their preg loss rate is generally lower, and the overall pregnancy kept is higher. And so this is both some of the, think of it as on sensors, your sensitivity and specificity. That's what you're doing for the palpator here. I mean, there's going to be some false positives, some false negatives that they're finding, and how do you get that rate as low as possible? And I think this can be a really good indicator of somebody that needs to do some training, and that training there can really have some impact on the overall conception rate. Another place you can look with some of the just processes that are going on at a farm is the GNRH. Um, here, this is an example of the GNRH report. So if I open it up, so the first thing is it separates out the sexed versus non-sexed semen breedings, and then the number of hours for GNRH. And here we got this farm, so it's mostly 15, 17 hours for both of them, and you don't see a lot of difference in the conception rates between them. But I've been working with different farms, and I've found places where it's closer to like 27 hours or 25 hours. And you talk in a meeting about, well, I thought we'd do this in the afternoon. Yeah, it's the PM GNRH. That's what we do. Well, when the guys show up at 4 in the morning or 3:30, PM to them is 10 a.m. So having some conversations around that to change the way that those processes work can have an impact. In this right chart, another easy one is just looking at it by pen. And so what order is the GNRH being given in the same order as the time day I? And so this can be a good place that even just changing the order that you do the GNRH to match what your time day I, that you can see some improvements in conception rate. So a lot of these are easy things. Just can you get the insight? Are there little tweaks that you can make to processes? Are there people you can identify for better training? Another one, if you're doing, see this a lot more in like heifer yards, but if we're doing a lot of breedings, one thing you can do is kind of get a sneak peek of the conception rate of some of those technicians, and so you can look at the non-return rate. And so what this report really is doing is trying to look at, how many animals have not returned in that 23 to 35 day range by different technicians. And so it's something of a sneak peek of what the conception rates are going to be a couple of weeks ahead of time. So if you're trying to identify different drift from different breeding technicians, this can be a early detection place to look. I don't see any questions, but if people have questions, this would be a good place as I kind of finish up some of the initial conception rate and some of the different processes on conception rate. Another one I was just going to point out, not going to really drill into these reports too much, but implants. Here we have conception rates for different implants. So within that report map, if you go to reproduction, this top one here for embryo transfer, there's a few different reports here. And within conception rate, you can also look at conception rate for implants. Within those reports, you can evaluate by embryo source, grade, stage, technician, all these different kinds of factors you want to look at. Additionally, so somebody asked, how do you handle the conception date on implants? So in BoviSync, the implant date is the date of the actual implant, and so the conception date, the days created calf, has the additional 7 days added to it. Related to that, you can also look at conception rate by the number of days since heat. So if you want to look at your 7, 8, 9 day implants, you can look at the conception rate by how many days in between the heat and that implant being done. Another place to look for some of the process things is technicians a lot of times can be real selective on doing implants. And so if they have an implant that's scheduled, when they come up to that animal, they should be doing an implant, but some of them they're going to reject for different reasons. When they reject that, they should be recording a service rejection. And that service rejection, they'll put a reason for it. It's sick, there's no CL, something like that. And it puts their name to it. And so now if you do a conception rate, you can also include those ones. And now you can look at what, if a technician walks up behind an animal, what's the rate of animals that they're going to inseminate, and of those, what's the conception rate? And so that way you can look at what's the overall pregnancy if they come up to a cow, and also ones that they're implanting, because both are important. They definitely should be rejecting some, but if there's too much focus on solely conception rate, you can skew it through changing their behavior to being really selective on the animals that they want to implant, and you end up skipping quite a few and adding a lot of days open onto those animals. Here, somebody else is asking in BoviSync, how does the 21-day preg risk compare to dairy comp? There's a knowledge base that you can find, you can look up, that has a further description. But probably the simplest description of how the difference is within Dairy Comp, and this applies to other software. Typically, you're going to look at a 21-day calendar period. And so if I breed a cow on the, we'll just call it the May 21st to May 22nd period. If I breed that cow on May 2nd and it's her first service and she becomes pregnant, and she just passed her volunteer waiting period, we're doing timed AI. When I run that preg rate, the preg risk in Dairy Comp, that animal won't show up because she hasn't been in there for enough days. There aren't enough days in that period. And so you end up skipping a lot of the first service conception rates. And that's also why you'll see really wildly different preg rates that, I've seen 2-3% differences by running at different days of the week. So in BoviSync, the way we do it is you do that 21-day period, but you do it for every single animal. And then the herd is just summing up all of the animals. And so by doing that, you're able to include a lot more of the first service animals. So I say all that to give you the explanation for why there's a difference, but that preg risk, if I come back to one of my first slides, I can just explain a little bit more why I'm not a super big fan of preg risk. So the way we calculate it, I think, is more accurate. But it really only matters when you compare yourself to yourself in the past, especially as we are better at choosing different reproductive metrics that we want to do. Some farms may choose that they want to have a very far out volunteer waiting period and go for really high conception rates. Other farms might find it's more profitable to not have super high conception rates, accept a little bit lower conception rate, pick different processes for doing that repro, and have an earlier volunteer waiting period. The preg risk is really a good indicator of, it's really a measure of like exponential decay of your open cows is really what it's doing. Where I think some of that, the percent preg, I think can be a pretty effective metric, because everybody wants cows pregnant by 150 days. Like nobody's going for something later than that. And I think that neutralizes some of that a little bit. But any of this repro stuff, I think a lot of it's, comparing yourself against yourself and taking into consideration some of the seasonality. All right, so moving to a couple other places of some unique things for improving processes. One thing I was going to point out, most farms in BoviSync have this stuff turned on, but I just wanted to make sure to point it out so people know it and understand it. Some people turn it off because they don't understand it. Those last two items in the herd check settings, one is for if there's a breeding chore that's more than 3 days old. So this animal on the right here, she was supposed to have been bred, supposed to get a GnRH on the 9th, supposed to have bred on the 10th. I know, maybe she's the wrong pen, who knows. Didn't find her, they didn't give her GnRH, didn't breed her. You don't want animals that get skipped. I mean, maybe it's in the hospital pen, you intentionally miss it. But somehow, if the animal's supposed to be bred and you don't want to have that fall off the list. You don't want to have it get lost in the crowd of animals. And so one of the things that BoviSync does a really good job at is handling all the exceptions. And so here's all the group rules for what we're going to do for volunteer waiting period, timed AI, but here's an exception. And I really only care about that exception when I come back to her at herd check the next week. And so here, this farmer has it set up for at 3 days. So if there's a breeding that's more than 3 days past due, it's going to create a repro check. Now this animal is going to automatically show up on the herd check list. When we're going through scanning cows to find them to preg check, I'm going to see this pop up. It's going to say it was supposed to be bred 4 days ago. I can look at her. Does she have numbers written on her? Is there some way that I can tell that she was bred? If she's bred, I can make my note. We need to record this one as being bred on the 10th. And if I don't think that she was bred, maybe she got missed, maybe she was intentionally skipped, but nobody did anything about it. Now I can decide, all right, maybe I want to start her on BoviSync or whatever it is, the procedure that I'm going to use for this cow. But I'm already standing by that cow, and now's the time to make the decision. And so that's why we built it in this way. That last one is for if they're in a repro check, if they're open and there's no timed AI scheduled for the animal. So if you have activity systems, you may not be using, most likely aren't using that one, but if you're doing timed AI, that's another place that for whatever reason, I don't know, you had an animal in double OVSync, she comes in for mastitis, you cancel it, I know you DMB it, you change your mind later, remove a DMB, something, like, I don't know, just different weird things happen that people make decisions, change decisions on animals. It's really kind of a catch-all. So if you're doing timed AI for everything, if that animal for any reason is open and doesn't have the next sequence of shots and breeding scheduled, it's going to put a repro check on it. So it brings them up and you can take a look at it. Another thing in BoviSync that they added here in the past year was putting in, well, first of all, it's this expected mature weight. So the third column here, you can see we've got a whole list of different animals, and there's different expected mature weights. And that expected mature weight is based on the breed. If you have genomics, it uses the genomics. If you don't have genomics, it uses parent average. And it comes up with the expected mature weight for that animal. And if you have no genomics, no pedigrees, then you just get the breed average. But it's trying to make a best estimate of what is the mature weight of that animal. Using that expected mature weight, it then creates a growth curve for that individual animal. And then any weights that you record, it's going to use that growth curve, map it on the growth curve, follow it forward to the current date, and give you what's the expected weight today. And so that's the fourth column here. The fifth column is what's the phenotypic difference of that weight. And so here you can see that there's different ranges of animals being over and underweight. An interesting way to look at that is look at pneumonia scours counts. What are some of the health events of those animals early on, and how has that impacted their growth? But using those curves, now you can also extrapolate forward into the future. And then, we all talk about 55% of mature body weight for breeding. Here's a distribution of a heifer yard, and what that, the distribution of what's the 55% mature body weight, what age and days. So if I come back to this individual animal here, that's 317, she's underweight, she's going to be farther out, but this other animal here that's 130 pounds over, she's going to be sooner. And so that's what's making up some of this distribution. And so there's a report item for the age of 55%. And so it tells you how many days old they're going to be when they get to that 55% mature body weight. A couple of ways that you can use this to make improvements in Repro is there's definitely got to be some type of a minimum age that we're doing, because they have to get to a certain frame size. But then beyond that frame size, if they have the frame and now they've achieved the weight, we can breed them sooner. And so you could set up systems where it'll automatically move into the AI pens or pre-AI lines based on the age and that 55 days. The other place that my mind goes when I see this distribution, if I know this farm is breeding over here, I can see that, well, first of all, most of these animals are coming in really early. So we're spending a lot of money to make these animals get up to a weight that we don't really have to achieve. And so if this is the right, if 410 or 420 or 400 is the right number of days for what you do, you may find that being able to have the combination of moving those animals when they've achieved their weight, the ones that are underweight, you're holding back a little bit farther, you may be able to change some of the nutrition on this. So that way we're not feeding so many of these to be ready a month, 6 weeks ahead of where they need to be. And so I think there's a really interesting opportunity there from a both nutrition and repro management standpoint of trying to better align growth with the breeding that we're trying to achieve. Another one I was going to point out on some of the repros earlier mentioned, there's 10, 18% difference on some of the transition cows on that first service. Here, one of the ways we can improve some of the transition, this is a small way. But generally, farms move animals into the close-up pen at days carried calf. If you use the due date, a calculated due date, you can both decrease the stocking density of that close-up pen, and you can increase the number of animals that are achieving, the 14 or 21 days. I mean, depends upon if you're doing anionic salts or other products or how you're managing that. But whatever your goal is for days in close-up, you can have an increased percentage of animals getting there. And so the due item, there's another item that's days until due. The due date's based on breed, the sire of conceptions, gestation length, time of year, if there's twins or not. So like this example here that I was trying to highlight, this one has twins, and so you can see it's several days earlier. It uses the lactation number. But by using all of these different things that are published in JDS papers to try to best calculate what a due date is, by moving them at 21 to 27 days till due into the close-up each week, we can more accurately get the right animals into that close-up pen, and also be able to reduce the stocking density by having less animals that are in there for too long. So a very, very small thing that can be done. I mean, we basically just change instead of days carried calf, change it to days due. People on the farm really see no impact. It's automated. What shows up on their phone is just a slightly different list of animals that's a little bit more accurate. And by doing that, you can get a little bit better transition and a little bit more impact on repro. Questions on any of that stuff? Now I'm just going to touch on genetics and a few genetic reports a little bit. One interesting place to look at genetics is everyone loves to blame all the nutritionists for bad milk, bad fat, bad protein. A lot of times that's the case, sometimes it's not. Looking at this herd demographics report here, where I'm overlaying milk, fat percent here, protein, with what the PTA values are for those animals. Sometimes it's not the nutritionist, sometimes it's inferior genetics. And if you want better components, maybe we need to use different sires so we can try and get better components. And so trying to overlay what's the genetic potential of the herd versus what we're seeing phenotypically can be a helpful missing piece of the puzzle that sometimes we don't look at. Yeah, and this example also included some of the feed saved. So here's a little bit more kind of standard way to look at genetics. Just wanted to show you an example of this. So in a genetic progress report here, you can have the birth date of the animals, here the display type, we're changing this to being by year, and then adding in a bunch of different columns. So if you want to add some different columns, come in here, type in whatever other items you want to add in, we can add those in. And then here I've got a line chart just showing what the genetic gain is for net merit. So they've been pretty good up to 2019, a few changes, and came back down, and it's been progressing up since then again. So one of the interesting parts of BoviSync that we probably don't highlight very much because I know it gets confusing. A lot of people don't know how to use Excel. But I want to give you an example of, I forget, I had some clever name for it, but something like excelling with BoviSync. That's what I was supposed to change this title slide to. But think about some of these different genetic items. Sometimes you don't have, you want other genetic items that aren't already pre-built into BoviSync. So here I'm going to walk through adding some different columns. So here I've got a list of animals with sire, maternal grandsire, and I can add a column, come to the formula, and just going to give you an example, something really simple, just adding days carried calf as equals days carried calf but now I want to do some math on it. Let me add 10 to that number. I'm going to do that, come up with a new column name. So I have days carried calf 10. So if you look at the report, we can see here that it's just the 10 plus that number of days carried calf. If I scroll down in this thing farther, this is available functions. So I click on here. This is going to take you to a page that shows you all of the different things. The first set are mostly math and a few other logic things, and then it gets into more specific BoviSync specific functions. So here, if I want to do like event counts, it's giving examples of I want to get the event number of diarrhea events for a calf, or up to the first 100 days of age, or 30 days, or 14 days of age. Another one can be useful here for genetics is parent average. In the sire one, I can look at the sire, and here's a list of all the different traits from CDCB. And so here I can do equals sire, put in that cheese merit trait, and then come up with, all right, so I'm going to call this one sire CM. So that was good for that sire's cheese merit. But now I also want to look at, all right, what's the parent average for the animal instead of just that sire? And so this is going to use the combination of the pedigree of that animal, and now I can add that in and then take a look at what the parent average cheese merit is. And so you do this for productive life, feed saved, the mastitis, and the health traits, any of these different things that CDCB has, they're all available here. Next, I could do the birth date, change this date format to be year. Clicked on the wrong thing here, so went to year month. I change it to year, and now group it. And so now I can see this. I could look at, if I want to see the deviations, I could do that. If I want to see averages, medians, max, min, whatever type of math I want to do. And so here now I can see genetic progress for cheese merit over time. All right, questions on any of those slides? I'm getting about to the end of the presentation. The last couple things here is just want to give you guys a sneak peek at this Insights Modern. So I've been working for a little while on making some updates, particularly in just the user interface, making it look a little bit nicer, a few additional features. But a big piece of it is there's still a lot of people using the classic reports, and we want to start trying. That old reporting system is much slower. It doesn't have the features. And so one of the first things here that we just did this week is starting to give people a link. If you're on the classic reports, you can click this link, and it's going to take you into the BoviInsights Modern. And the real goal is how do you converge the report system? I mean, we have this classic and BoviInsights, and we really want to consolidate that and at the same time make some updates to the UI. And so just wanted to highlight, just give you a sneak peek here of what that UI looks like. I mean, it's substantially the same as what BoviInsights is. You really shouldn't see many differences, but there's a few things that are pretty slick. I really like the grouping here. So you don't have to click on the drop downs. I can just grab any header, slide it up into the top, and I can group it. And if I want to change the way I'm doing my roll-ups, I can just slide them around. I don't know, when I'm trying to drill into stuff, that's it's just super nice. So a few different things that are coming that just thought I'd give you guys a sneak peek of. So, and with that, if you guys have any questions, email support@bovisync.com. Got my email address here. Then we'll also try and send out this PowerPoint to everybody that joined. So if you want to look at any of the reports, see some links, see how to get to those reports, you can use that as a reference. So, any other questions at all? All right. Well, thank you guys for joining.